Well, hello there, bibliophiles. We're talking more books today. Today we're going to be talking about the public education system, also known as the compulsory education system. And we're going to be talking about a book written by a teacher of the year in New York. And his thesis is that teachers aren't there to teach. They have a secret curriculum, a hidden curriculum. And these are the top 10 things that I learned from Dumbing Us Down. Number 1, in a secular society, the public school functions as a church. So, like in the past, churches were institutions where people learned a moral system. They learned the history of, they learned the history of religion, essentially. And that was the standard that we used. And in today's society, a secular society where there's a separation of church and state, the public school has that role now. So our schools are what are teaching us our value systems and how to behave in society. And people might say that it's failing, but on the contrary, it's spectacularly successful. Number 2, the public educational system is funded by captains of industry to create docile and malleable workers. So it isn't there to teach you so you can think, so you can ponder philosophy and solve the mysteries of the universe. It's there to make sure you are a good worker and that you are very impressionable, that you are looking to be told what to do so you can fulfill your duties. And that's why the education system is bankrolled by corporations. Number 3, public schools are successful at teaching us to find meaning in the production and consumption of goods. That is exactly what you need in a consumer society. You want to be fulfilled by consumption of goods, and not just foodstuffs. Entertainment, television, movies, video games, comic books. You're just supposed to lap it up. And interestingly enough, they all have the same message, which is whatever your ideology of your country is. And in America, it's capitalism and freedom. Number 4, public schools are successful at teaching us confusion. That's something that he noted was kind of interesting, is the way we taught. All these subjects are split up, and the bells are always going off, and you're not sticking around. You gotta, whatever you're doing, you gotta drop what you're doing. It's not important. You're supposed to go do something else. Shuffle along, move along, and the bells, that system actually most closely resembles how it used to be in during the Industrial Revolution. People working in factories, the bell would go off, and you would do a different task once that bell went off, and it would or whistle. That brings us to number 5. Public schools are successful at teaching us to obey authority. That's really important. And unquestioningly obey authority. You don't ask any questions. You just do what you're told and assume somebody else has it all figured out. You don't need to think about that. Shuffle along. Yeah, they want you to obey the. Well, in a way, you're obeying your teacher, right? Which is an authority figure. But the bigger authority figure, you could say, is science. Follow the science. Do what you're told. Number 6, public schools are successful at teaching us intellectual and emotional dependence. And they do this in various ways with their reward system and with the grading system, and there's if you start analyzing, if you step back and look at how students are being taught, you'll see that that's the real thing that's going on. You aren't being fed information that's important to make you a brilliant person. You're being conditioned. You're being prodded. You're being corralled. You're being repressed. And that's all by design. Number 7, public schools are successful at producing personalities dependent on addiction. There's a couple of ways that happens. For one, schools like my school, we had soda machines, and we had a concession stand that sold candy and sugar. And so, you get used to this addictive behaviors. I got to get my caffeine. I got to get my sugar. Well, that blossoms. That's planting a seed. And that's producing addictive behavior, because also the other addictive behavior is a coping mechanism. It's like dealing with the stress. You will turn to more things, more addictive things, more destructive things. Number 8, public schools are successful at producing individuals with a poor sense of future. I can attest to this. At least that. I believe I have received an exceptional education. But some of these things came through. And that is certainly one of them. The poor sense of future, planning, multi-step planning. Like I've gone out of my way to learn chess so I could learn how to strategize in multiple steps, because I'm very one-dimensional. Like input in, input out. Like I don't even cooking. Like heat, eat. I don't. Multiple step things are something that I have not been well conditioned to do. And planning, that fits into planning and this poor sense of future. Number 9, public schools are successful at making us into permanent children. It really does infantilize us. It really does make us, and you see with every generation they get better at this. With every generation, people behave like spoiled children for longer and longer into their adult lives. Like usually that's something that's squashed out of you really early. So that way when you hit puberty and when you run the risk of starting a family before you intended, you at least have your childishness, forced out of you. And they don't do that anymore. They do the opposite. They want you to be a whiny little brat that consumes the goods. And they're extraordinarily successful at that. Number 10, public schools are successful at making us bibliophobic. The way you read in school, the way they teach you to read, for one, they pick books that are generally boring, and two, the way you read them is you read a chapter of one book, and then you read a chapter of another book, and then you read a chapter of another book. So imagine if you took film school and you watched movies that way. You watch the first 15 minutes of one movie and then the first 15 minutes of another movie and then the first 15 minutes. You wouldn't like movies. You would be like, this is a stupid way to watch movies. Like, why can't I just watch the movie from beginning to end instead of, stopping and then watching different movies and the first 15 minutes of that. So that's the real deal right there, because schools revolve around books. Books preserve information, and books have always been our external data storage system, and that's why universities and all higher education use books to teach us. Well, public school, for most of us, is teaching us to hate books, and by doing that, that's the first thing you do when you conquer people is you burn their books. Well, they didn't need to burn our books. They can't convince us to read them. We're not illiterate, we're alliterate. So we've been dumbed down, people, and we're staring, now we're careening towards the wall, towards the cliff. So get this book, read it, and educate yourselves.